In the United States, a serial killer killed 8 women over the course of 7 weeks. He usually hung out in crowded places, like shopping malls, carrying an expensive camera, approaching women, complimenting their appearance, lying that he was from a modeling agency, inviting them to participate in a so-called modeling talent show, promising to launch their modeling careers. However, once the girls got into his car, this man would drive them to remote areas, torture them, and kill them. A lot of people think that remote mountainous and forested areas are more likely to have kidnappings and accidents, but there's another problem that's just as dangerous, that people often don't think about the second scene. The so-called second scene refers to a new, temporary location outside of the originally planned site. For example, imagine a girl who decides to go shopping at the mall or attend a party. On the way, a seemingly friendly stranger invites her to get a ride or attend another party for various reasons. If she agrees, then she may be taken to a remote location where she could be kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered. The notorious beauty queen killer, Bernard was born in Sydney, Australia, on March 13, 1945. His father was an officer in the US Navy. His mother was Australian. From his childhood, this man was a sickly and unfortunate child. At birth, he nearly died for unknown reasons. At the age of 2, he nearly drowned in a swimming pool. Although there are no reports documenting this boy's childhood, during his adolescence, Bernard revealed his obsession with young girls. When girls were bathing, he would hide outside the window and peep at them. On January 4, 1963, at the age of 17, as his mind gradually became twisted, Bernard and 2 of his friends attacked and sexually assaulted a 13-year-old girl on a beach. After the case, 2 friends denied involvement in the attack, with only Bernard himself admitting to the crime. However, despite the seriousness of the crime, Bernard was only sentenced to 1 year of probation and mandatory psychological counseling. It's said that during his psychological counseling, Bernard underwent electroconvulsive therapy, but it did not suppress his violent tendencies at all. On the contrary, electric shocks became one of this serial killer's terrifying methods of torturing his victims. While time moved on to 1968, a young woman married the 23-year-old Bernard, but after only a few weeks, she chose to divorce him. Later, the young woman revealed the truth. Originally, she only discovered that Bernard's briefcase contained many photos of girls wearing swimsuits, and days later, she discovered that Bernard was trying to seduce her sister and her mother. Therefore, she had an argument with Bernard, but in the argument, he tried to kill her. In addition, Bernard was involved in a series of sexual assault cases and was taken away by the police. To avoid charges, in 1969, Bernard moved to Florida. There, he made huge strides in construction and real estate. Initially, like most people who suddenly become wealthy, Bernard moved into a luxury apartment in Boynton Beach, bought a speedboat. To participate in racing competitions, he also bought a Porsche. However, his commercial success did not stop his evil thoughts. It is well known Bernard was extremely obsessed with young women. On one trip, he keenly noticed that girls had very little guardedness toward the photographer's identity. In order to better implement his plan, he purchased several high-end cameras. After returning to Florida, Bernard often hung out in Boynton Beach, inviting girls who wanted to be photographed to his apartment. In 1971, Bernard was arrested for ordering 2 girls to strip naked and allowing him to take photographs of them. However, when he appeared in court, Bernard revealed his horrific fantasies, prompting the judge to order him to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. After the evaluation, he was determined to have a mental disorder and was unable to stand trial. In 1974, Bernard committed another crime. In the shopping center, he deceived a girl into having sex with him by lying about offering her a modeling opportunity. Although the girl filed charges against him, Bernard was only sentenced to probation and ordered to undergo psychological counseling. Since crime didn't receive the punishment it deserved, Bernard's behavior became even more despicable. In 1982, while visiting his parents in Australia, he kidnapped 2 15-year-old girls, stripped them naked, and took photographs of them. However, even though Bernard was arrested and faced charges of kidnapping and sexual assault, the case was repeatedly delayed, and Bernard was granted bail with the help of his parents, allowed to travel freely between the United States and Australia. Later, back in Florida, Bernard attacked 2 more girls. In 1984, Bernard embarked on a 7-week crime spree, during which this beast murdered at least 8 women. Since the victims were all attractive women with modeling potential, he became known as the Beauty Queen Killer. His first known victim was 20-year-old Teresa, a model who had competed in the Miss Florida beauty pageant and went missing in Miami on February 26th. On March 4th, 23-year-old Elizabeth, a Florida Miss finalist and high school teacher, also went missing in Miami. A few hours before her disappearance, Elizabeth met with her parents. Her father noticed bruises on her arms and legs. Though her parents wanted to help, Elizabeth merely explained that she had been injured in a fight with other students. A few days later, the police linked the disappearance of the two women to Bernard. On the day Teresa went missing, she was working at a car race. Bernard was also participating in the race that day, and at around 1 p.m., Teresa left the track with a man who looked similar to Bernard. Elizabeth was Bernard's ex-girlfriend, and she was last seen at a gas station with a man who looked similar to Bernard. Upon learning that he had become a suspect, Bernard left Miami. Then, on March 18th, 21-year-old Anne Ferguson went missing from a shopping mall on Merritt Island. 5 days later, Anne's body was found in Canaveral Groves. She had been strangled to death. Her body showed signs of varying degrees of physical abuse, so much so that the police had to identify her through dental records. 3 days before Anne's body was found, on March 20th, Linda Grover, a 19-year-old Florida State University student, was kidnapped by Bernard. He invited Linda into his car on the pretext of modeling work. However, after Linda got into the car, he tied her up with a blanket and then took her to a motel in Georgia. There, Linda was sexually assaulted and tortured for several hours. Despite the difficulties, Linda managed to save herself. She locked herself in the bathroom and frantically banged on the walls to attract attention. Meanwhile, Bernard realized that his crime was about to be exposed, so he drove away from Georgia and began his escape. On March 21st, Diane, a 23-year-old woman, told her husband that an Australian man had been asking to take her picture, saying he would get her into modeling, and she refused him because the lie was so obvious. However, 2 days later, Diane disappeared. Her car was gone too. On March 25th, 21-year-old Wendy went missing from a shopping mall in Oklahoma City. A day later, Diane's body was found with multiple stab wounds and signs of having been tied up with rope. On the same day, Wendy's body was also found. In addition, Diane's car was found by the police, and after inspection, the police found a sample of Anne's hair inside Diane's car. On March 29th, Cheryl, 18-year-old girl, was taken away by Bernard at a shopping mall in Colorado. A day later, Cheryl and Bernard appeared together at the only point where the four states meet, the Four Corners Monument. After that, Cheryl disappeared completely until May 3rd, when her body was found. Her death time was confirmed as March 31st. On April 1st, Las Vegas hosted a fashion show. This show provided models who wanted to become famous with the opportunity to appear on magazine covers. At that time, someone happened to take a photo of Bernard sitting in a chair, his eyes fixed on Michelle, a 17-year-old model wearing a miniskirt. After the fashion show ended, Michelle disappeared. The last time anyone saw this charming girl alive was when she left the scene with Bernard. At that time, from the police point of view, Bernard was involved in several murders and kidnappings across the country. Therefore, in order to end the crime of the beast, on April 3rd, the FBI included him in the list of the 10 most wanted fugitives. However, the next day, Bernard kidnapped 16-year-old Marie in California. But he didn't kill the girl, perhaps because he knew he was wanted by the police and it would be difficult to lure anyone else. So he kidnapped Marie and made her help him lure victims. Fearing for her life, Marie agreed to Bernard's request. Within a few days, they had crossed Arizona, Missouri, and Illinois. On April 10th, they arrived in Indiana. There, Marie helped Bernard kidnap 16-year-old Dawnette. Over the course of 2 days, Dawnette suffered repeated torture and sexual assault. When they arrived in New York State, Bernard took Dawnette to a forest, where he tried to strangle her and stabbed her. Afterwards, mistakenly believing that the girl was dead, Bernard left the scene. However, Dawnette didn't die, and she also received help from a truck driver. While receiving treatment, Dawnette revealed important information to the police, that Bernard would flee to Canada. On April 12th, Bernard and Marie kidnapped 33-year-old Beth at a shopping mall in Victor, New York. Without hesitation, Bernard shot her dead and dumped her body in a gravel pit. He then took Marie to the airport and bought her a ticket, saying that he hoped Marie would not witness his death. No one knows why this serial killer decided not to kill Marie. Why did I survive and they didn't? I don't know. That's everyone's question, Marie said. I never screamed. I never retaliated. I succumbed and, was vulnerable to him. On April 13th, at a gas station in Colebrook, only 12 miles from the Canadian border, two state troopers, Jellison and Wayne, encountered a man behaving very strangely. At first, they just thought they needed to check the man's ID, but as they approached him, the man nervously pulled a handgun from inside the car. So Jellison and Wayne also drew their guns and aimed them at him. After a few minutes of standoff, Jellison managed to grab the man from behind. However, the man aimed directly at his own abdomen, shot through his body, and hit Jellison. Then the man shot himself in the chest, with the bullet striking his heart, causing him to die instantly. After confirmation, the deceased was identified as the long fugitive Bernard. Afterwards, many people believed that the things Bernard said to Marie and his actions confirmed that he had already had suicidal thoughts. But no matter what, his death means that the series of crimes he committed will never be brought to trial. Later, Bernard was cremated in Florida, and the man left behind personal assets worth nearly $7 million.